What if I told you that one of the most powerful men in history was also one of the most terrified? Joseph Stalin ruled the Soviet Union with absolute control. Millions feared him. His word could decide who lived, who disappeared, and who died. But behind the image of the cold, unstoppable dictator was a man completely consumed by paranoia. A leader so suspicious of betrayal that he eventually stopped trusting almost everyone around him, including his closest allies, generals, doctors, and even friends. And the darkest part? Some of that fear came from the brutal system Stalin created himself. By the 1930s, Stalin had transformed the Soviet Union into a state built on fear. Secret police monitored conversations. Citizens were encouraged to report neighbors, co-workers, and sometimes even family members for anti-Soviet behavior. One wrong sentence could get someone arrested in the middle of the night and sent to a labor camp for years. But while millions feared Stalin, Stalin feared them too. He constantly believed enemies were hiding everywhere. Inside the government, inside the military, even inside his own inner circle. That paranoia exploded during what became known as the Great Purge. Stalin launched massive campaigns against people he believed might threaten his power. High-ranking military officers, Communist Party members, intellectuals, and ordinary citizens were arrested by the hundreds of thousands. Many confessed to crimes they never committed after torture, threats, or psychological pressure. Some were executed immediately. Others vanished into gulags, brutal Soviet labor camps where countless prisoners died from starvation, disease, freezing temperatures, and exhaustion. The terrifying thing was that nobody truly felt safe. One day, a person could stand beside Stalin during meetings. The next day, they could disappear forever. Even senior officials lived in constant fear because loyalty didn't guarantee survival. In fact, sometimes being close to Stalin made people even more vulnerable. If he suspected someone of gaining too much influence or popularity, they could instantly become a target. And much of this paranoia came from Stalin's own past. Before becoming dictator, Stalin spent years surrounded by political conspiracies, revolutions, betrayals, and assassinations inside the communist movement. Leaders were constantly overthrown, arrested, or killed. Survival depended on secrecy and suspicion. Over time, Stalin stopped seeing trust as strength. To him, trust became weakness. That mindset only intensified after Vladimir Lenin's death. Stalin fought aggressively to eliminate rivals inside the Communist Party and secure absolute power for himself. Once he achieved it, he became obsessed with protecting it at all costs. The result was a leader trapped inside his own fear. Stalin rarely slept normally and often worked late into the night. He tested people constantly, watching how they reacted under pressure. Dinner gatherings with Stalin became infamous because guests never knew whether the night would end with laughter or arrest. Some officials later admitted they were terrified every time the phone rang late at night, because it could mean Stalin wanted to see them, or that secret police were already coming. Even the Soviet military suffered heavily from Stalin's paranoia. During the Great Purge, many experienced generals and commanders were executed or imprisoned because Stalin suspected possible disloyalty. Ironically, this weakened the Soviet Union right before World War II. When Nazi Germany invaded in 1941, the Soviet military was initially devastated, partly because Stalin had destroyed so much of his own leadership structure out of fear. But perhaps the darkest example of Stalin's paranoia came later in his life. As he grew older, his distrust became even more extreme. He reportedly became suspicious of doctors, believing some were secretly plotting against him. This paranoia contributed to the infamous doctors' plot, where several Soviet doctors, many of them Jewish, were accused of conspiracy and arrested. Fear had completely consumed him, and in a cruel twist, Stalin's paranoia may have contributed to his own death. In 1953, after suffering a stroke, Stalin reportedly lay on the floor of his residence for hours because guards were too frightened to enter his room without permission. Nobody wanted to risk angering him if he was still alive. By the time help finally arrived, it was too late. The man who spent decades building a system ruled by fear ultimately became trapped by that same fear himself. And maybe That's the dark reason Stalin trusted nobody.